I feel like this was the closest I've ever been to a heart attack. So, welcome back. So I was just like, nope. Das ist die nächste Frage.
Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Fluent Future podcast. Here we talk about experiences with different countries, cultures and languages of the world. Today I have my friend Kathi here, so tell us a bit about yourself.
Hello, thank you for having me here today. My name is Katharina, I'm 22 years old, I'm from Austria, and I'm going to talk about my time living in Barcelona today.
Right. Before we dive into that, what's your experience with languages?
So, when I entered high school, I chose a language emphasis, which made me learn English, French, and Spanish. We also had Latin, but I assume we are talking about living languages. And yeah.
I think you learned English before going into high school, right?
Yeah, we had some lessons in primary school, but very few ones.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I started learning languages in middle school, at the age of 10.
Mm-hmm, right. And then shortly after the real English lessons started, I guess you started learning French, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Then Latin. And the last language was Spanish.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. What was your favorite language growing up?
I actually enjoyed learning French the most at first, but when Spanish came into it, it kind of switched.
Mm-hmm. And in the third year of high school, you went to Spain, to Barcelona, for a short language exchange, right?
Yes, exactly. Together with Justin.
Right, exactly. Tell us a bit about this trip.
So, it was a language journey organized by our Spanish teacher in high school. We stayed in host families and visited a language school in Barcelona for 2.5 weeks.
Mm-hmm. And you stayed in a host family with one friend?
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. We were always two people per host mom or host grandma. It was mostly old Spanish ladies hosting foreign students, making some extra money by doing that.
Mm-hmm, I see. So in your case, it was just one mother or grandma?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think her daughter was also living with her, but I think she was only there a few times. I can't remember exactly, but we had really nice host sisters. Those were two girls from the States who were staying there at the apartment for, I think, almost 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
They were a bit older than we were, but they were really nice. They gave us a lot of tips.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So, what was your first impression of Barcelona?
It's a big city. It's very lively. There's just a lot of stuff going on all the time. A lot of people and nice weather. Also, it's really artsy. Like, I feel like you see like little pieces of art in every other corner.
Mm-hmm. You mean like the architecture, like the buildings, or
First the architecture, but also like a bit urban things like little art collection, little stores. You see this very typical modernisme flower everywhere. So it's just like some little details.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I see. When you traveled there, what was your level of Spanish like?
It was very basic. It was like school Spanish. I feel like we already knew a lot of grammatical structures, but our vocabulary was very limited.
Mm-hmm, I see. But you still tried talking Spanish with your host family?
We tried to, mostly while having dinner, but also the conversations were really basic. It was mostly about food, a little bit about our country, about our families, like very basic stuff.
And besides that, did you get to practice a lot of Spanish speaking during that stay?
I feel like I practiced the most while being at the language school, because they made us speak a lot. Like, we did some revisions, some new vocabulary, but also like some communication training. And apart from that, we also went outside sometimes to explore like the surroundings of the language schools. They gave us some activities to do, like going to a grocery store, those kind of things. Maybe we didn't learn so much, but we practiced a lot during these 2 weeks at the language school.
Mm-hmm, I see. What about talking with strangers? For example, when you go to a restaurant, you mentioned now the grocery store. when you went grocery shopping, did you try to talk in Spanish?
I tried to, but since we had a pretty intense schedule by going to the language school and doing sightseeing with our teacher and trips on the weekends, we didn't have so much free time to go to restaurants a lot or to go see different places. So most of my conversations in Spanish were kind of part of the language journey program, or maybe 90% of them.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned now a few activities, but what was a typical day for you like during that exchange?
So I'd say we got up in the morning, went to the language school, did like the program there, went for some sightseeing with our teacher after finishing language school. Then we had some free time, and then we went back home actually to the apartment to have dinner and go to bed because we had to get up the next morning pretty early again. But it was a really nice schedule for 16-year-olds exploring a new city. So I wouldn't complain about that at all.
I see. So before going to the language school, did you have breakfast with your host mom or host grandma?
We had breakfast there, but most days she was still asleep in the morning. But we had breakfast there because she showed us in advance where all the things are in the kitchen.
Okay. And then you had dinner with her all the time? Okay. Or most of the days, I guess.
I feel like almost every day.
Cool.
If not every single day. I think we had dinner with her every day.
And you talked about two girls from the US who were there as well at the same time. Did you have dinner all together, the five of you? Or
most days, yes. But since they were a bit older and also more flexible with their studies, so they didn't arrive home at the same time every evening. But especially under the week, we had dinner with them most days.
And their proficiency in Spanish was good? Were they good Spanish speakers?
To be honest, I can't remember, but I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think they had a good level of Spanish. But I feel like I think they were not studying languages, but doing an exchange program in another field of studies. So they were maybe only talking Spanish to our host abuelita.
Okay, I see. I was just wondering because that kind of changes the environment when you're having dinner together, and some people don't understand Spanish, so you might not speak Spanish, but English.
I feel like, or I'd say they were more or less our level.
Okay.
So we had pretty basic conversations with them at the dinner table in Spanish and afterwards in English. They were really nice.
Were there any struggles for you during that stay?
No.
No?
Not really, no. Because everything was perfectly organized.
And I guess it's a short time as well, right?
And it's not that
Time
much
flies.
of time. It was, we arrived and we went back home.
Yeah, true. Were there parts of the trip that you can pick out and said, okay, this was an event or something we did that I liked the most?
Yes. One weekend, we made a trip to Sitges, town nearby Barcelona. It's about 1 hour by train. And we spent a day there. And it was a really nice, warm, sunny day in April. So for me, it almost felt like summer vacation. And I really enjoyed that day.
Cool. And this short trip, or rather short trip, was not the only time you went to Barcelona. Tell us a bit about the second trip. Or I guess before that, what did you do after finishing high school?
Well, I started my degree in 2020. And 2 years after that, I left for my semester abroad. But I have to dig a bit deeper because when I started university, I chose a language emphasis again, which includes a mandatory semester abroad.
By the way, what is your degree? What are you studying?
I'm studying teacher education. I'm becoming a primary school teacher.
Right. Okay. And there you chose an emphasis on languages.
Yes, exactly. And so since I knew I had to do a semester abroad, I started to think about it pretty soon after starting my studies, and I was sure that I would end up going to Stockholm. But since our semester abroad is mandatory, our university gives us the time to go. And for us, it was the winter semester. So I got pretty afraid of the cold, long nights in winter in Sweden. And my second criteria after the weather thing was the size of the city, because we're living in a pretty small town, and I wanted to see how it is to live in a bigger city. And Barcelona is more or less the biggest city we could choose to go to. And then I like Barcelona, and I like Spanish, so yeah, things were said and done.
Cool. Let's talk a bit more about this planning process. Your university gave you, I guess, like a list of partner universities you could attend. And were they all in Europe or also outside of Europe?
I don't know if they have updated it since then, but the list we got to choose from only contained partner universities in Europe.
I see. And from those, did you have to choose like a top 3? Or did you just say, okay, I want to go to this one? And
we had to do a first choice and a second choice. But both my first and my second choice were in Barcelona, but different universities in Barcelona.
Ah, I see. And were there like limited spots for one university or?
Yes, but in the end, it kind of worked out that there weren't too many people for each university.
I see. So it wasn't too competitive going to Barcelona?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Also, we were guided very well by our teachers at university.
Mm-hmm. You mean your home university?
Our home university, yes.
What is that, by the way?
PH Steiermark.
Mm-hmm. I guess just if people are curious.
People.
Yeah. Okay. And they guided you through the planning process, and you also applied for Erasmus.
Yes, exactly.
Funding.
Or more or less, they gave us the guidelines, or they gave us more or less a checklist, which we had to go through and get all the steps done in order to sign up at the host university and to get a schedule, to choose the courses, and also, of course, to get the Erasmus fund.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Great. What was the partner university's name in Barcelona?
Universidad de Barcelona.
Okay, so I guess the main university.
There are actually much more universities in Barcelona than I expected there to be.
I guess it's a big
but
city.
It's a big
yeah.
city.
Yeah. Okay, but would you say that's the main university or no?
I think it's the oldest university, but I'm not sure if it's really the biggest one, because there are a few other big universities in the city as well. Our university, our home university, offered us 2 universities in Barcelona, or like one in the center, the one I went to, and another one a bit outside of Barcelona, but not too far away.
Mm-hmm. I see. Let's talk a bit about the housing thing. So I know personally from your stories that it was quite difficult. So tell us a bit how you managed to find housing.
Short claim, it was a shit show. No, I left for Barcelona on the 24th of August last year, and I first stayed in Barcelona for a few days with 3 friends from home, and I was pretty sure to find accommodation during that 3 days, but all the apartment visits I scheduled in advance were cancelled shortly after we arrived, and since I thought, well, I actually want to enjoy my time with my friends now, I wasn't too eager to get new apartment visits. So after they left, I didn't have a place to stay, but I took a hotel room for, I think, 3 more nights.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing nothing else except from visiting apartments. And I saw some really nasty places, to be honest. But since I didn't manage to find an apartment or a room to stay in that time, I took a short-term rental in order to get some more time to look for an apartment a bit more peacefully.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of rushing to find something as soon as possible. And then I ended up moving into a spare room at another old lady's house. She also rents room to students, and she had a student coming to stay in her apartment for long term, but there were like a few weeks in between, so she inserted it on Facebook in a Facebook group for short-term rental. And I took that. Briefly after I moved in, she connected me to an old friend of her who is also renting rooms to students, and I had a visit, liked the place, at least the most from all the places I visited. And yeah, then I stayed with the old lady, or the elderly lady. Not to be
respectful.
Not to be respect the elderly. So I ended up staying more or less 3 weeks at her place, and then moved into the new apartment when the room got free.
I see.
And that was on the 24th of September, so exactly 1 month after I first arrived to Barcelona.
Okay, so the first few days when you arrived to Barcelona were vacation. Everything was still nice. But then the rest was a struggle to find housing.
I'd say best time, crisis, like a solution, and then best time again.
Okay, good.
I ended up moving into a big apartment. It has 11 rooms in total. And last year we were a group of 11 students living there from 5 different nations, from Spain, Mexico, the United States, Belgium, and Austria. Yeah, I had the best 10 roommates I could wish for. So things ended very nicely for me.
Okay, that's good at least. So you talked about the short-term housing, the apartment with the old lady you stayed at. You said you found that apartment through Facebook.
Yes.
Through a Facebook group.
Through a Facebook group.
Okay, is that common in Barcelona?
It is, but you have to be careful to not get scammed.
Okay.
Because there are a lot of scams out there on Facebook. So if you ask me for a recommendation, I'd say look on Idealista and Badi. Those are 2 apps for finding an apartment or a room in a shared apartment.
And then the second apartment, the big one that you talked about, you found that through basically, I guess, a recommendation, because
Yes, exactly.
The woman you were staying at, she had a connection. She knew the landlord who was renting
Yes.
out this apartment. Perfect. So you didn't have to look for that online. But do you know if it was available on any of these sites that you mentioned?
Not on one of those sites, but it's another agency. I don't know if I can tell their name for legal reasons.
Okay. I mean, they get free advertising.
No.
I don't know.
No, they charge so much.
All right, so we don't mention that.
So no, but not on those sites, I think. But I also have a website.
Okay. So this was a few years after your first time in Barcelona. How was your level of Spanish the second time there?
It was worse.
Oh.
I mean, I graduated high school in 2019. To be honest, I didn't put any effort into improving or maintaining my level of Spanish after graduating. Also, I had little contact with it in my studies, or I had no contact with it in my studies. I also didn't travel for a longer period of time. I think during COVID, I watched one series on Netflix in Spanish, but that's all I did. So my level was very low when I arrived, but it didn't take me long to get into it again and to get back some vocabulary. And at first I didn't talk a lot, but I listened a lot, and I listened to reggaeton music, Spanish music a lot. I feel like at first I was pretty afraid of speaking and making mistakes, so I didn't talk a lot in the very few days and weeks, only the necessary things. But after I got more confidence by being surrounded by the language all the time, I started to have longer conversations, and it went pretty quickly.
You mentioned now that you didn't talk much except for the essential or necessary parts. What were those for you?
So since I visited a lot of apartments, I also met some landlords not or barely speaking English. So I talked Spanish to them, and like some questions on the streets, like looking for directions.
But I guess that's good. Gives you practice. Talk us a bit through the start of your university classes at that time.
So I signed up for my classes in advance, And I think the official start of classes was on the 12th of September.
You're very accurate with the dates.
And I got to know a lot of people during the first few weeks because I had some courses with a lot of other Erasmus students, but also some other courses in which I was the only Erasmus student in there. So I got to know both people, international people and Catalan people, or people studying the whole degree at the Universitat de Barcelona. Yeah, I really had a great time. Also, when classes started, it was still very warm outside, so we were doing a lot of activities after class. Also, still doing like some kind of sightseeing, but just we really had a really good time.
What about your apartment? Were there mostly exchange students? Were there local people?
Not at all. Most of them are doing their whole degree in Barcelona. Some of them also graduated last year, but many of them are still living in Barcelona. I visited them in September again, which I loved. Yeah, it was only with me. It was for people doing Erasmus or Erasmus and other exchange programs, like the guys from the States. The other 3 exchange students, they left in February, and there were 3 other people moving in. One boy and one girl from France, and one girl from Egypt, and yeah.
So in your apartment, did you speak mostly Spanish or English or German?
It was a mixture because it depended a bit on the people I was spending time with, which language we would speak to each other. If I was only with Spanish speaking people, I always tried to talk Spanish to them in order to improve a bit. But when we were a mixture of all nationalities, we tend to be speaking English with each other. And if I was with my very close Austrian friend, which I didn't know in advance but got to know in our kitchen when she moved in, I spoke German. But also when we were like all together at some evenings, it would end up in some corners of the table speaking English, others speaking Spanish, French. Yeah, it was a fun environment.
A very international environment. But I think that's cool. That's also part of Erasmus experiences, I guess.
I have to add something because there were also French-speaking people living in the apartment, and I feel like I first mentioned that I learned French, I think it was in May, because I'm just so insecure about my level of French. I was afraid that they would kind of start talking French to me at some point, so I was just like, nope.
When it comes to meeting new people, it wasn't a big difficulty because you lived with so many people. So I guess you met them the easiest way by living with them. But in other ways, besides, I guess, classes at university, what were some ways that you got to meet people or meet cool people in Barcelona?
I think it's actually the easiest thing to do in Barcelona because it's a city where a lot of international people live, and there are not only a lot of Erasmus students but also people working remotely or doing internships, just living like the digital nomad lifestyle, being there for a limited period of time. So people are very open-minded and eager to meet other people, and for like the practical ways to do so, I'd recommend joining apps like Halo or Meetup because they offer a big range of different activities you can sign up for. Also, there's this group called Midnight Runners. I think it's pretty international. I feel like they're located in a bunch of different cities, but it's basically a group of people organizing an event or 2 events per week where people can join for free, and then they just run and do little workouts in between, and it's also it's a pretty nice way to get to know other people, do some cardio.
Yeah, I remember we joined them once when I visited you.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is actually a really good piece of advice. Join the Midnight Runners. Yeah, as you mentioned, they're in several big cities.
I think so.
Yeah.
I feel like the next time I'm traveling, I have to check it out.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I saw online that they are in New York or some other cities, but yeah, people can check it out. Midnight Runners is what they're called. And yeah, So I guess that's a great way to meet people. You mentioned apps like Halo, Meetup.
Meetup, yes.
What about Facebook events? Is that used a lot in Barcelona?
Not so much. I feel like for you it was a lot in Norway, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But there were, of course, like also Erasmus groups or people posting information about Erasmus, upcoming Erasmus trips on these groups. But I feel like Instagram was the more used social media tool for those trips and Erasmus events.
But I guess also in these types of events, you meet more international people or people who are not from Barcelona. Is that right?
I mean, I don't know if there are a lot of other groups out there for people just to meet up. I'm sure there are because it's a big city with a lot of amenities. But in my case, for like the Erasmus groups or Erasmus Instagram pages, it was only Erasmus students or 99% Erasmus students joining them.
Was that something you were looking for? Or did you try to meet more Spanish people?
At the very beginning, I joined some of those trips because I feel like it's a very easy way to get to know new people because those are Erasmus students. They also want to get to know new people. But I feel like after some weeks passed, I already found like a group of other Erasmus students and I got to know my roommates better. So I didn't join so many of those trips then, but rather like go for the trips on my own. But I also know from other people that they joined those trips during their whole semester abroad because it's a very nice offer because they provide students with affordable and well organized trips to different cities. And also in April I joined an Erasmus trip to Ibiza.
And these trips are organized by Erasmus?
Not by Erasmus, but by the Ibiza trip was organized by ESN, like an Erasmus network. So I feel like that's a little bit connected because it's also like this Erasmus alumni working there, like people who did Erasmus before and then decided to join this club more or less. But the other Erasmus websites in Barcelona were organized by external people. But still, like, they offered affordable trips.
So most of the local people you met were either at university or the people you lived with?
Yes, exactly.
And did you spend a lot of time in your free time with them?
Most of the time.
Most of the time?
Most of the time.
Also with the friends you made at university? Or mostly with the people you lived with?
Mostly with the people I lived with because, well, we lived in the same place, so there was no way we didn't spend time with each other. And also we went out a lot together as well, but we also spent many nights like in together, just having dinner, chatting for a bit, yeah, like doing cozy things.
Did you ever feel homesick at any point? No, not at all?
Not at all.
Wow. Do you think that was because time flew by so fast?
I think so, yes. I feel like everything happened too quickly for me to start being homesick. But still, for Christmas, I came back home and I was really happy to spend time with my parents and grandparents, and I feel like I just didn't realize how much I missed them. The time I spent with them was super beautiful.
Was that something you planned after you flew to Barcelona to come back over Christmas? Or did you plan that in advance?
So actually, I was first only supposed to stay for a semester and not for a whole year. So when I booked my flight to Barcelona, I also booked my return flight for the 31st of January. Another date. But since I knew I would come back by the end of January, I first didn't plan to fly home for Christmas or to come home for Christmas. But since I then changed my mind and asked to extend my stay, I just thought I wasn't sure if I could really spend some time in Austria in February because they in the university in Barcelona doesn't have a real semester break as we do in Austria. So then I was okay. Well, I should really come home for Christmas, And I don't regret it at all because I had 2 really nice weeks at home.
Mm-hmm. That decision was related to the decision to extend your stay, to stay
Yes.
longer. And when did you make that decision?
I think it was in the middle of November,
Mm-hmm.
because I then kind of realized that half of my semester is more or less over, and I was just, no, like that can't be over so quickly. So I asked my university if it's possible that I stay for a second semester, and then I asked my host university, and both agreed. So I was pretty lucky with that, and I could stay for another 6 months.
Amazing. Were there any struggles with that transition or with that decision to stay longer at all? With the housing, university?
University, yes and no. Like, no in terms of them allowing me to stay longer, but yes in terms of the courses they acknowledged, or the credits they acknowledged for the courses I did in the second semester. Like, I got all the credits acknowledged for the first semester, but for the second I only received more or less half of them. But it was definitely worth it. I think I would have also stayed if they wouldn't have given me any credits, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But apart from that, the thing with housing was also pretty uncomplicated, because I just sent a WhatsApp text message and my landlord said, yeah, it's okay, CC. And one other thing, also the Erasmus fund wasn't complicated to extend at all.
So you've received Erasmus funding as well for the
Yes,
second part of your stay. Cool.
lucky me.
Lucky you.
It was also pretty uncomplicated in terms of signing up for a new course in the second semester, because I already knew how it worked from the first semester there. So yeah, it wasn't too hard at all.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So to sum it up, you stayed there the first few months. Over Christmas you flew back. Then you came back to Barcelona. And I guess around that time, or let's go to, let's say, February or something, because then you stayed there for 6 months. Did it feel like a vacation? Did it still feel like a short exchange semester? Or did it even already feel like home?
That's a good question. Since I just had more free time while being in Barcelona than I'm used to having at home, it never completely stopped to feel like a vacation. But still, I got used to living in Barcelona. I developed some routines, and it was still day-to-day life, but like with this
Extra
pinch of extra spice, with just sprinkles.
Uh-huh. Cool. And you now mentioned routines. What were your routines like? What was a typical day for you like in Barcelona?
Well, so typical day, when I had classes 4 days in the first semester and then 3 days in the second semester. I got up in the morning, went to university, went back home, depending on my timetable of that day, went to the gym, back to the apartment, having late lunch, or some days even dinner, spending some time with the romies, and then depending on my like energy levels and plans for the next day, we would do something in the evening or stay in.
Where did you work out in Barcelona?
I have a membership at McFit, and it works for all the gyms in Europe. I think in whole Europe. So since I already had that membership back then, I used it for the first few months. Then my roommate started going to a gym really close to our apartment, like right around the corner. And he really liked it, so he recommended it to me and also signed up for it. And so I paused my membership for a few months, and then I continued my membership at McFit when I arrived back home.
In Austria?
In Austria.
Mm-hmm. Was there any point in your stay in Barcelona where you realized, okay, there are some big differences in terms of culture or societal differences between Spain or Barcelona and Austria or Graz?
But that's another good question. I'd say I didn't recognize so many differences concerning the culture, but a lot of differences concerning the lifestyle in a big city compared to the lifestyle in a small town.
What were those differences for you?
I'd say there are just more possibilities or more activities to choose from. There's just in general much more, I mean, traffic of course, but also like more life. There are more people. You cross ways with so many different people every day, and I feel like there's just a lot of things like happening at the same time.
Mm-hmm. So you wouldn't say there were any cultural differences?
I'd say people get up later and go to bed later.
Mm-hmm. And they have the siesta.
Siesta. That's a lie though.
Oh, it is?
No. I had one roommate really consistently doing a siesta.
Wow. Were there any big differences in terms of the food?
I mean, we all know like some really delicious examples for Spanish food.
Tell us some.
Oh, so I'd say crema catalana. I think it's very typical for Barcelona or like Catalonia. Churros con chocolate, tortilla de patatas. Paella, I feel like it's super touristic, but it's still delicious. Torrijas. It's like it's similar to French toast.
Mm-hmm.
Like my roommates told me it's really similar to Kaiserschmarrn as well.
Mm.
I have to stop now because I'm getting hungry.
Yeah, same. Okay, let's move to a different subject. Towards the end of your stay, of the second semester of your whole year, what were the emotions like that you knew, okay, I have to fly back soon? When did you book a flight?
Pretty late because I didn't really want to accept the fact that my time there is coming to an end. But I mean, I would lie if I'd say that I wasn't heartbroken. But I feel like it's normal in life that it just one period ends and another one starts and brings a lot of new opportunities with it. So I'm pretty happy to be back and being able to finish my degree now at my home university. But I feel like it really made me want to live abroad another time or to maybe even move back to Barcelona.
So looking back at your whole experience there, what were some struggles? I know you mentioned that you didn't have any struggles the first time there, but during this year there must have been some struggles.
So let me think. I'd say I had 3 bad days during this whole year. I think I told you about this theory before, but the first one was when I just realized that it wasn't as easy to find accommodation as I expected it to be. The second one was shortly after when my phone got stolen.
Stolen?
It got stolen.
Okay.
Like it got stolen out of my...
Explain the circumstances. Where were you? What happened?
I was at a festival.
How did you get to this festival?
I think other Erasmus people told me about it. And so I went there with a big group of people. A really great time. Brunch in the park.
Where was it? Was it in the city? Or
It was close to the stadium.
Mm-hmm.
So still inside the city, more or less. Great music. Go to Brunch in the Park.
The name is Brunch in the Park.
Brunch in the Park, yeah.
Oh.
Brunch in the Park.
Okay, Brunch in the Park. Interesting.
Like electronic music.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome. So I was there and my phone got stolen, but I feel like that can happen everywhere where there are a lot of people, like in very crowded places or at music festivals or concerts. I think it's always important to watch your stuff. So the second bad day was when my phone was stolen at a festival, but still I would go there again. A festival, beautiful. No, watch your stuff, kids.
Watch your phones.
Watch your phones. And the third bad day was months after. I feel like almost at the end of our time in our apartment when we found a cockroach, and it was really disgusting.
Just one cockroach?
I feel like it was the first one. And the first one was like the most traumatizing one. And then during the following weeks, there were like 4 or maybe 5.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we didn't name them or anything, but...
You kept them as pets?
Oh, no. Maybe we kept them, but just didn't know about that.
Mm-hmm.
No say.
Is that a typical thing for Barcelona?
I mean, you sometimes see them on the streets when it's getting warmer outside during the hot months. In winter, you don't see them at all. And I heard mostly affected are apartments which are located in the first floor, which was the case for our apartment. But maybe that's a rumor. I think it's just a bigger thing in older buildings than it is in new modern ones. And I was also in a big ass hurry, and then it fell out of my pullover.
Out of your hoodie.
Out of my hoodie, then it touched my leg, and I was like, I feel like this was the closest I've ever been to a heart attack.
Damn.
Not being dramatical.
Yeah. So those were your 3 bad days.
Yes.
I guess according to you, the only 3 bad days of your exchange. Well, I guess the 3 worst days of your exchange at least. But that's good that you can count these bad days. Now we talked about the bad days. Let's talk about the good days. Were there any highlights that you can think of?
It's so hard because it was those small moments, just walking down the street, visiting an art gallery, as simple things as going to the gym. It's really hard for me to name specific highlights, but I really like to travel, so I feel like I'm going to mention the trips I did during this year. So I went to Gran Canaria in October, to Austria for Christmas, then to Ibiza in April, to Madrid in May, and in between to some smaller cities close by Barcelona, maybe even by train.
Any other highlights specifically related to the city Barcelona?
There are a lot of salsa bars. Since the city is really crowded as well to being really beautiful and lively and exciting, it's really nice to get outside of the city from time to time, and places like Castelldefels, Sitges, Garraf are not far away at all. They're easy accessible by train, and it just gives you a day to breathe a little bit.
I see.
So it's very easy to get out of the city for some time as well. Also, the beaches there in summer, awesome, stunning.
What about the beaches in Barcelona?
I mean, I'd say it's a city beach. Of course, there are a lot of people, and coming with that, there's also, sadly, a lot of garbage lying around there. And when people are able to swim, there's like a lot of sunscreen inside the water. So I feel like it's a nice place to meet your friend, to hang out a little bit, to catch some sun in the afternoons. But I feel like always when I had more time, I would go outside of the city. To a beach a bit outside of the city.
One thing I didn't ask you yet is, do you have a favorite restaurant in Barcelona?
Honest Greens. But it's not a...
What is it called?
Honest Greens?
Honest Greens?
But it's a chain. I feel like they also have it in Portugal and maybe in other countries. It has really tasty and at the same time really healthy food. It's affordable as well. But specifically for Barcelona, like for typical food or for tapas, I'd say El Mercat.
El Mercat.
In Carrer de Bruc.
Good.
And I have another recommendation which comes from my heart. There's this coffee shop called Good News, and they have some little stores, but also like some, not trucks, but trucks actually in different places in the city, and it's super cute. They have a good coffee, also a really nice merch if you're into that kind of things.
What are some other pieces of advice you have for people who are planning to go to Barcelona?
If you're going for a limited amount of time, I would recommend you looking for an apartment in advance. Maybe even using an agency like student housing or uni places, so you really get to book your place before you go there and know you will arrive to a fully furnished and ready to move in room when you arrive there, just to take some stress away from you. Then I'd say, watch your phones and have fun.
Do you have any specific advice for people who want to learn Spanish during that time?
Actually, for me it was the best possibility to improve my Spanish level, to do an internship which was offered by my host university. Since there I was surrounded by Spanish-speaking people and Catalan-speaking people, and also I talked Spanish to the students and teachers. I feel like I learned most in that time, so maybe finding an internship can help a lot in Spanish-speaking surrounding, or Catalan, whatever you want to learn. But also, maybe not only meeting Erasmus people can help, like, for example, by joining other activities or going to other meetup groups. I feel like on Meetup they even have some groups for language exchange. like a tandem program, which is maybe, I've never been there unfortunately, but it sounds like a really amazing possibility to improve your language skills.
Sounds good. How many people were there usually in your classes at university?
Around 30, I'd say.
30. And you mentioned that there were some courses you took where you were the only exchange student, and you had some courses where there were several ones.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about these differences.
So I ended up having both classes with a lot of other Erasmus students and classes where I was the only one, because I chose not only English classes. I think I have to add something. My studies are pretty practical in some ways. So also at my home university, we have a lot of courses where we do more things than we learn theoretically. So I chose the courses that sounded like there's not going to be so much theoretical input in Spanish or Catalan, because I had the goal to improve my level of Spanish during my time at my host university. Getting back to the differences between those courses, I'd say the biggest difference was the language. So the Spanish courses I chose ended up being held in Catalan, because actually all courses are held in Catalan at the University of Barcelona, as far as I know at least. Or I think the teachers can choose if they do it in Spanish or in Catalan, but all the courses I had were then held in Catalan, which wasn't a problem because my colleagues were really helpful and really kind. They helped me a lot with the instructions, and since I already mentioned it was pretty practical. I mean, there were like some minor misunderstandings, but still it worked out. Of course, I also had the advantage that I could hand in my written assignments in these courses in English or in Spanish. The teachers were pretty understanding, because those courses I chose were offered to us on like a list of recommended courses for incoming students.
But in terms of the understanding, when you sat in the class and the teacher was talking Catalan to you, did you understand anything at all?
I mean, it's similar to Spanish, and it's also similar to French in my opinion. And I learned French, so I got most of the things, but I had some questions.
Okay, so but you usually got the gist of what the teacher was saying. Okay, but you mentioned your colleagues were nice enough to help you and translate
I feel like it was also a really nice possibility for me to get into touch with them more or less, because I used to be a bit shy when I meet people for the first time, and since I wasn't so sure about the tasks we had to do in class, I was, oh well, can you maybe help me? Or did I get it correctly? I sometimes even try to do it in Spanish, and it worked out better and better over time.
Cool. This difference between Catalan and Spanish, was that noticeable throughout your stay in Barcelona?
I'd say yes, because there are a lot of independency flags visible, for example, on balconies or on the streets. I also saw some demonstrations, like friendly demonstrations, but still demonstrations. And I also met some people being more or less offended by someone calling them Spanish and not Catalan. So wow. It's a thing.
Wow. So these people would feel offended if they hear you speaking about them as your Spanish friend and not your Catalan friend?
Yes, that's actually the point. But I also have to say I never got into any kind of difficult situation. I just experienced it like a few times where people were friendly correcting you.
Okay. If they hear you say, this is my Spanish friend, and they're like, no, I'm your Catalan friend.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. But in terms of the language, all the people there know Spanish and Catalan?
Yes. I mean, not all since there are a lot of people living in Barcelona, not originally being from Barcelona, not everyone speaks Catalan, but I feel like most people who are born there learn Catalan and Spanish also in schools. For example, in the school I was working at, the teacher taught in Catalan. But they also had Spanish courses, and all the kids and the teachers knew Spanish. It was also no problem that I was doing classes in Spanish.
I see. I guess one more thing I'm curious about is the people you lived with in your apartment.
Yeah.
You mentioned that they were Spanish. Did they speak Spanish or Catalan? Or were they even Spanish? Or were they Catalan?
Okay, so concerning the Spanish people I mentioned earlier, it was actually one girl from Alicante and four other people originally coming from the region of Catalonia.
Mm-hmm. So you offended them by saying they're Spanish?
For them, no, actually. But, I feel like one of my roommates also corrected another one of my roommates. Like, the same situation you mentioned earlier. She kind of told him, yeah, you're Spanish, you have to like olives. Oh, I don't know. I can't remember exactly if it really was about olives, but it went like this. You're Spanish. You have to like olives, and he was like, no, I'm Catalan.
Interesting.
And it was no discussion or no fight about it, or also he wasn't offended at all. But it was just a point mentioned.
Interesting. Well, those were some really cool insights. Thank you for that. Thank you for your time, and thank you guys for watching or listening. And yeah, I will see you in the next episode.
See you.